Hello and welcome to this episode of Therapist Talks. With me today is therapist Tayba Azim. Welcome, Tayba. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Celebrating Eid and alhamdulillah.
Good. Well, it's really lovely that you've been able to join us for today's episode. I'm really looking forward to hearing all about you and your work. So to kind of kick us off, really, would you like to introduce yourself, who you are, what you do?
Okay, so I'm Tayba. My counselling service is called Counselling. Blossom, Evolve and Elevate. That's what I kind of look at with my clients. A little bit about myself is I was trained in I was trained as an integrative counsellor, but I also work primarily from a sort of trauma-informed and relational perspective as well. But also utilising an embodied approach through my Mizan therapy work that I do.
Great. Clearly a whole range of interests and expertise there. And I would love to kind of delve into some of those in a bit more detail. So, and it perhaps is the first time that our audience are hearing about Mizan therapy. So shall we start there? What's that all about?
Absolutely. So Mizan therapy, it's a traditional healing practice that sort of uses particular massage movements on the body, on the abdominal area, around the womb space and on the back as well. As we know scientifically, trauma is stored in our bodies. And in particular, certainly in my experience as well, it tends to be stored in the womb space. That's the work that I do with my clients in terms of helping them to release some of that trauma and the stress that's been stored there. So it's basically a traditional approach to sort of womb healing, abdominal healing, which releases trauma such as intergenerational trauma, as well as any kind of physiological, gynecological issues as well. So anybody who has period issues, PCOS, fertility issues, etc. So again, that's the thing that I work on and work with. But again, often enough, I have found that these issues are related somewhat to the stresses and the traumas that the women who are coming to me are holding.
Yeah, and thank you for that lovely description of it, because as I said before, I can imagine lots of people watching this perhaps have not come across it or heard of it before. Two things that I'm really noticing in what you've just said then is there's a real link then between what might be going on kind of psychologically, emotionally for us, mentally for us, and it's linked to the body. And based on that, then your treatment then tackles both together.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. What I have clients who either come to me just for counselling, or they've found out about Mizan therapy and they're just coming for Mizan. So they're coming because they have got period issues, they have got fibroids, and they're trying to conceive. So they come with that mindset that, and they're just dealing with one thing. Or my clients for counselling are coming because they've got relationship issues, and perhaps they're going through depression and anxiety. So they're coming just with that mindset. And then what they find when I'm talking about what I do is they also realise that perhaps there's a link as well. So I do offer it as an approach where I integrate both. And again, for some clients, it might not be that they want both or they need both in particular, but where I offer that and where I share that this is what I do have this curiosity, and I do have clients saying they would like to try that. Thankfully, whenever they have tried it, it's been a very positive experience, because sometimes in the talking, they're unable to process that trauma. And so the Mizan therapy helps to release some of that trauma, some of those emotions, without going into great detail or talking through it.
Yeah, it's great then, as you said, that by integrating them, both are available to your clients. So as you said, if a client comes via the counselling route, or if a client comes via the Mizan therapy route, you're able actually to offer them both within the work together. Yeah. Yeah. And do you often find then that you'll attract clients that for therapy, for counselling, and that actually some of them then are like, yeah, or you recognise yourself, actually they could do with some Mizan therapy as well, and you offer it to them?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the first call, sometimes it might go over a client's head, or they might not register Mizan therapy. But because I have already mentioned it, you know, in the consultation process, as time goes by, I'm like, do you know what? You know, I wonder if you could, you know, do with Mizan therapy, and whether that's where some of that healing, some of that resolve might come from. And they're like, oh yeah, I remember you'd mentioned that, but I'd kind of forgotten about it. So, you know, thankfully, today I've always had clients who have kind of agreed or consented to that sort of suggestion. I think they all, obviously clients know themselves as well, and they will often sort of find that, yeah, you know, there's an element that I'm not being able to kind of work through, and perhaps Mizan or, you know, that embodied approach will perhaps help. And again, I've had very positive experiences through that. The relief and the release that comes through that is amazing.
It's amazing to hear about as well, because I think actually, is it something, I can imagine it's something quite rare, or not many practitioners offer it. So is it, you know, I'm hearing that actually it's a very specialist type of therapy that you're offering here.
Yes, definitely. It is quite a niche. I've often had clients actually travelling from London and Blackburn, and you know, for them I'm about 2.5-3 hours away, but that's the approach that they like. And again, it is sort of specialist in that sense, that I'm able to provide both of these and integrate them.
Yeah. And could you kind of put that in context then, in terms of your work? So whereabouts are you based? How long have you been doing this work for? And, you know, maybe a little bit about kind of what the training was involved then to become a specialist Mizan therapist as well.
Okay, sure. So I'm based in Leeds. My work is online and face-to-face. So it just depends on what the clients want. We can often be working online and then do some face-to-face work where the Mizan might be involved. And if a client is a bit too far out or is unable to travel in that sense, I'm able to use some approaches where they do some techniques on themselves as well. So I may utilize that and you know, see if the clients can engage in that, and often enough that's worked well as well. So I trained as a Mizan practitioner around 2019. I was also in the middle of my PG with the University of Leeds, doing the counselling course. I had a bit of a break in between, so I started doing the Mizan practitioner training. So I first started working, because I qualified immediately with Mizan, I started taking on clients, in particular for Mizan. As a trainee, I was very much aware of the you know, emotions being stored in the body, etc. So with that awareness, I was able to work with some of my clients in that sort of safe way, but predominantly working with what they're coming to me for, with the reproductive issues perhaps. Once I qualified, it just came to me that I can integrate both. And I felt more comfortable and more confident in bringing both the approaches together. So that's where I know, or that's what I basically offer in terms of that. There might be particular sessions that we'll first do around talking. In my assessment, for example, I have a whole host of questions around their menstrual cycle, when they started, if they're going through menopause or perimenopause. And often enough, I see my clients kind of, you know, their eyes sort of light up, or they're intrigued that I'm asking these questions as well. And I do remind them that the purpose of this is because of, you know, the Mizan therapy that I'm trained in, and it's really useful in looking at a holistic sort of picture, basically. And because as a person, it's mind, body, and soul or spirit, so to speak. So that's the approach that I tend to use.
Yeah, a very holistic approach by the sounds of things. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And with that, I might add, both with Mizan and with counselling, and I'm going to particularly talk again about more Mizan. There's a huge connection with our womb space and us as women, and the connection and the status that we have in Islam, and the connection to Allah. So when I've got Muslim clients approaching me, I use an Islamically informed approach as well with them, and I may educate them on the connection with the womb space and with Allah, and the spiritual connection that there is.
Yeah, I'm sure many people watching this would be interested in that very specific aspect then of it. So stage one is that you've combined kind of traditional talking therapy with Mizan therapy. And then on top of that, stage two is then you've kind of specialized the Mizan therapy even further and made it into like an Islamic Mizan therapy. Yeah. So do you want to say a little bit more then about, you're saying that there is this connection between women, the womb, our related spirit, and our spiritual connection then. So do you want to say a little bit more about that? I'm sure our audience will be really intrigued by that.
So if we think about it on surface level, the status of a woman as a daughter, as a wife, and as a mother are quite high in Islam. Heaven lies beneath the feet of your mother. So when we look at that, that's sort of that surface level. But what's behind that, when we become mothers, and I will also just add a note there. This is also for the women who perhaps haven't been able to conceive, don't conceive, may have had a hysterectomy. But if Allah has created you as a woman, there, you know, you have a purpose. It doesn't just have to be that, you know, you've got to procreate, basically. So when I speak of that, it's not just about the women who have had children. So generally, in terms of our perhaps our nature, we're caregivers, and we're quite loving, etc. We're quite forgiving as well. So some of these attributes they relate to the attributes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has as well. You know, the mercy, the forgiveness, the love. So if we look at it on that spiritual level, there's that connection. And then the Arabic roots, in terms of, if we look at Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, we're looking at forgiveness and mercy. And the root letters are also the root letters used for the womb in Arabic, Rahm. So again, there's that connection. If we delve deeper, my understanding, and from the Istada that I learned this from, is that it was the only organ that requested or argued with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was the womb, because she goes through much, and she's like, what about me? You know, I'm going to go through so much, and you know, what are you going to do for me? And that's where the verses come in with regards to whoever severs ties with you, I will sever ties with them. So that in and of itself is huge. We are also, as human beings, we're the only species who are carrying these covenant of God. Where, you know, you've got a spirit that comes into the womb space, you know, from the reality of this world and the spiritual realm. We are the connectors to that. You know, Allah has bestowed that mercy and that blessing upon us as women. So we, you know, the body has a right over us, and I said, you know, and that's something that we are aware of. But actually, we often kind of, as women, due to perhaps culture, patriarchy, you know, we often disregard it, even capitalism. So I ask women to reconnect to their womb space and give her the love, you know, that she needs and the care that she requires, because, you know, it's something that Allah has given us that needs to be protected, that needs to be looked after.
It's so powerful in what you're sharing with us today. Immediately, two thoughts come to my mind. One is, I can imagine there are lots of therapists perhaps, or practitioners watching this going, I want to train and learn about Mizan therapy. So I wonder if you can speak to perhaps people that might be interested in learning more about it. So if we start there, yeah.
Absolutely. So in terms of Mizan therapy, excuse me, hay fever. In terms of Mizan therapy, to train in Mizan therapy, you would get in touch with Bushra Finch, and that's through the Mizan therapy website. So it's spelled Mizan. Blue logo is what you're kind of like looking out for. And on there, she's got dates with the courses that she's delivering. And you basically book yourself onto that. It takes it's a week's worth of training, and it's hands-on, it's intense, and then you qualify to work with clients. But there's a whole system with that as well. You know, we need to have appraisals, we need to be a member of Mizan therapy, so that we're all working to a particular standard as well. Prior to undertaking the practitioner course, members who are interested would have to do what's called the Womb Space Online course. So that gives general information around the self-care practices and what what's needed in order to restore or make the womb space healthy again, etc. So once they've done that, it's prerequisite. Once they've done that, they can do the practitioner course, and then there's so many other things that they can do, such as pregnancy massage and advanced practitioner training, etc. So yeah, that would be the route into it.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that would be so helpful for many people then. Having heard you talk about what Mizan therapy is, will have perhaps sparked a lot of interest into training in it. Equally, on the flip side, I'm thinking about potential clients then that are then interested. And would it be something similar in terms of searching for then yourself or other Mizan practitioners then, if they want to go, oh, that sounds interesting, I want to learn more about myself and about my own female health systems, or thinking about how to look after myself better? Would clients then are able to clearly contact you directly or search for Mizan therapists?
Absolutely. So, my Mizan website is Nurturing Heart and Womb. So they can contact me directly via that, or they can look up Mizan therapy, and I believe there's a search button for practitioners near me. So they can put in their postcode, and they'll find a list of practitioners who are within the who have the membership with Mizan. and they can find somebody who's closer to them. What I might say is there's certainly individual need, and if people don't know where to start, clients aren't so sure where to start, you know, whether it's distance reasons, whether it's, you know, they might not have somebody, a practitioner nearby, it could be financial reasons. I would certainly say, you know, at least maybe do the room space online as well. That's a really, really good starting point and touches the surface. So it's taken on board, you know, certain information from there and implementing that in daily life. And then if and when they're ready, they might want to see a practitioner, or they might have that sort of availability to be able to see somebody if they're a little distance away. As I said, I've had clients who have come from London and Manchester, as I seem to be, for some, the closest. For others, because of the Islamic approach I use as well. So yeah, it just depends on what the client's needs are, really.
Yeah. Great, thank you. And of course, people can find your details and contact you directly via our MCAPN counselling directory. So you're on, yeah.
I am out there, yes. So MCAPN, absolutely.
Lovely. Great, thank you, Tayba. I'm just thinking then, based on kind of all of this huge experience you have in counselling and therapy and then Mizan therapy, I'd be curious to know, you mean, as therapists, after a while, we kind of look back at our own training or look back at our experience, and hindsight's a wonderful thing. Again, much of our audience might either be therapists themselves, they might be in training, or equally, they might be interested in becoming a therapist. Is there any advice you would give to somebody who either is thinking about being a therapist, yet to start their training, or are already in their training? What advice would you give them based on your experience, based on your hindsight?
I would say, if you're interested, then persevere, because there is a real need for Muslim therapists out there. You know, certainly coming from perhaps also a cultural perspective, a faith perspective. So yes, you know, persevere. What they may find, and some of the trainees may already find this, is it's very much a Eurocentric or Western model. So it may not take into consideration particular sort of identity and diversity, etc. There might be a small bit around that. However, I would say, you know, in addition to that, do your own research and join particular networks if you can as well, so that you've got that sort of support as you're training, or as you're looking into training. And then you know, think about what you want to specialize in and who you want to work with. And then again, build up your resources and look at additional courses. It doesn't mean you have to do them straight away, but if whilst you're doing the course, or whilst you're thinking about doing a course at one of the colleges or universities, or however that might be, then have a list of you know, other courses, other you know, diverse. I'm going to be quite sort of diverse therapists. Perhaps those that are delivering particular courses, like yourself, for example, Myra, you're doing I think the course on anti-oppressive therapy, etc. So I would really advise trainees, or those thinking about training in it, to look up courses that are delivered you know, by a diverse and representative range of therapists as well. And I would also say it may sometimes feel like a very lonely place in these environments, and just know that there are many of us out there We've, you know, in some way or form, certainly from my experience of talking to other, in particular South Asian therapists or Muslim therapists, you know, some of us have been through something or another and felt quite isolated, felt that there, you know, there may be some kind of, you know, unconscious bias, etc. But persevere, get your certificate, get the support, and then look at the way in which you might want to work with clients, because in a sense, the way I work now with clients, or have been, is very different in a sense to the way I was trained, with the do's and the don'ts. It doesn't quite work like that with the clients that I work with, who are predominantly South Asian women coming from a faith background. So there is something around that, and connection with other therapists, you know, coloured therapists, I think is really, really important, because you then gain a different perspective and it feels quite supportive. So I think, yeah, in a nutshell, persevere, you're needed. And whilst there is the Western model, and it may not reflect who you are as a person and the people that perhaps you've worked with, just generally, not just in therapeutic sense, get that certificate, and also by the same token, look out for courses, workshops that are delivered by the likes of yourself, Myra, as well. So I think that's what I would say.
Great. Such good advice there, because what I love about it is it's about going, yes, get your training, but actually think more broader. You know, think about what you want to do with it afterwards, and build, and not only what you want to do with it professionally. I talk about building your portfolio, like be intentional about building your portfolio, but also build your network. And of course, the MCAPN is kind of the perfect place to build your network as a Muslim, if you are a Muslim therapist. But equally, there are other networks out there that are specialist networks for particular identity characteristics, or specialist in the type of perhaps client work you do, or the particular modality you work in. But you're so right, though, it's not just about, let me get all the qualifications and piece of paper. It's also about us building our networks and relationships as well.
Absolutely, I think that's paramount, because through that as well, if you know, as you spoke about that sort of broader, you know, sense, is through that as well, through the networking, you know, you never know where you might get that referral from as well, depending on what you're specialising in, and if there's, you know, if a particular therapist that perhaps you've connected with, you know, gets to know you and understand your work, they might think, actually, you know, I can, you know, because I'm full, I could refer this particular client to this therapist. So yeah, build your network, definitely. I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah, lovely. Well, thank you so much, Tayba, for joining me today. It's been amazing hearing about your work, and particularly in this specialist and perhaps underheard area of Mizan therapy, because I just think that's now going to open the door for so many, not only therapists, but clients actually coming to access that support from you as well. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today, and to everyone joining us today as well, thank you so much. Check out the rest of our YouTube channel and social media posts for all of our other Therapist Talk episodes. We've got many more coming up for you as well. And once again, Tayba, thank you for joining me for today's very special episode. Thank you
for having me. Thank you.